that this is the Q4 educational series from Blue Bridge Networks. Today we're going to talk about budget, IT spend, and a lot of great challenges that we have to overcome currently. Blue Bridge Networks has been an IT company since 2004. We started as a data center as our core, and that remains our core competency today. We're also a managed service provider, and within that, cybersecurity offering, data storage, cloud backup, cloud computing, and of course, a licensed hardware software reseller. So that's what we bring to the table. And today I'm moderating with two good friends and customers and IT experts in this arena. So I'm going to jump right in that and introduce you first to George Mehok, and then Branndon Kelley, you go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we'll get right into the dialogue.
Great, thank you, Kevin and Steve for having me today. I'm excited to talk about this topic. First of all, I just want to let you know about my role a little bit here. I'm the managing partner of Aperture Technologies, or AXI. We're an automation technology company, and we design, implement, and manage robotic process automation software and the associated integrations to automate manual workflows. So it's a very relevant topic today as we talk about budgets and a potential downturn in the economy. So AXI, we specialize in automating processes within call centers, accounting, finance, legal, IT operations, and that includes IT security and compliance. So we use traditional RPA technologies combined with customized integration software. And prior to founding AXI in 2021, I spent 16 years as a chief information officer in both telecommunications and financial services companies, VC-backed, privately held, and public companies. I was responsible for all the traditional responsibilities of the CIO that comes with being a CIO. That includes strategic planning, software development, data center operations, SOC 2 compliance, cybersecurity. I was also, and my team was responsible for data center operations, both facility-based and cloud-based in AWS and in Azure. And during my 16 years as CIO in those companies, I was absolutely responsible for the budgeting process, which included all aspects of the IT spend. So I'm looking forward to talking about how we manage this going forward here in these challenging economic times. Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah, I think I'm to go next. And so good morning, everyone. My name is Branndon Kelley. I am the Senior Vice President of Technology, Innovation, and Transformation and Chief Information Officer, CIO for American Municipal Power, also known as AMP. AMP is based in Columbus, Ohio. We're an electric utility, a member-owned organization. So we have membership in 9 states across the Midwest and East, where we focus on delivering electricity and related services through the ownership of our own generation facilities, as well as purchase power contracts. We also deliver a whole variety of services, safety, financial, and then most recently, and some of the ones that I'm responsible for, is our digital enablement / transformation services. I've been at AMP for just over 13 years and spent about the last 23 years in the technology space, and since about 2007 in executive leadership roles running technology. I'm responsible for your traditional, CIO type roles, your back office, all your systems. I also have responsibilities in what is our operational technology, and that's the technology that we use to run our power plants and related grids. I also have responsibility in our smart grid, or what's also called advanced metering infrastructure. So that's the connectivity, the Internet of Things, and even hanging potentially on your house, enterprise cybersecurity, And then most recently, all of transformation and innovation within the organization. So leading a cross-functional team, as well as dedicated resources that focus on looking at continuous improvement, both what I like to call inwards innovation, external innovation. So inwards, looking at processes and things and where we could potentially use RPA or automation to improve processes, speed things up. Looking externally at some of the disruption that's happening in the electric grid, not only around your traditional IT type technologies, but as well as your technologies around generation. So solar, wind, and maybe most recently battery. It's going to be a lot of disruption as we go from a centralized generation model to a decentralized generation model, puts a lot heavier emphasis on data and connectivity. And then when you introduce data and connectivity to anything, it opens the door for cybersecurity threats. So I will stop there and turn it back over to you, Kevin, and look forward to the conversation and hopefully not being able to answer most of the questions appropriately.
Terrific, George and Branndon. First of all, thank you very much for joining. As the audience can see, and future watch and listeners will hear and see, this is a very dynamic group we have today, very talented subject matter experts who have very diverse and long-standing credibility in the IT marketplace. Both of their backgrounds are fascinating, which is why I wanted them to introduce themselves as opposed to reading a bio, so that you could get the depth and breadth of knowledge that we have today. Hopefully, by the end of this webinar, you'll be able to take home some good nuggets in your IT budget process that we're all in the midst of. So definitely this time of year, the elections yesterday and fresh on a lot of people's minds are recession, inflation, in terms of the marketplace and economics, the economic landscape. And as IT leaders, we're also very mindful of increased attacks and cyber and compliance situations that we have to be mindful of going forward. And certainly, last but not least, the fast-paced digitalization where technology changes so fast at a rapid rate. And businesses have to keep up in order to run more efficiently and to also using technologies to even potentially find profit streams, revenue streams, as opposed to just purchasing. So we're going to jump in and talk a little bit about some of the things like CapEx versus OpEx, maturation, the shift in that, analytics, automation, cloud, and some of the things that we have to budget, some of the must-haves, compliance, cyber, monitoring, performance, etc. So with that said, let me jump right in with you, George. As a former CIO, you have experienced budgeting during an economic downturn. Can you share how you managed to do more with less when budgets were tightened or cut?
Sure. Yeah. Unfortunately, I've been through several, starting with the .com bubble and late in the early 2000s, the financial crisis in 2007 to 2009, and then everyone experienced the downturn caused by the pandemic. In each one of those cases, there's a common theme. And as a IT leader and all the people that support the different business departments within IT, they basically have to do more with less. That's the common theme. You have to do more with less. And in those downturns, I was asked to reduce budget from 10, 20, up to 40% in one budget cycle. And I think we could be seeing that again this year. So the scenario is the economic winds turn. You have a meeting with either your CFO, owner of the company, or the senior management team, and it's not just the IT department that has to cut 10, 20, 40%, which affects everyone, but all the other departments do as well. And what that means is you have to work. One of the key learnings that I've had over the years is you have to really rely on those relationships that you built with your business partners in each one of the different functional areas to identify, first of all and foremost, what are the table stakes? In other words, what are the functional areas, the business processes that are most critical to the company, that typically relate to keeping the lights on, servicing your clients, remaining compliant, and ensuring that your security infrastructure is intact. You can't touch those. Those have to continue to function, or ultimately you won't have a company, you won't have customers. So you have to work with your business partners in order to identify those and then prioritize those as the highest priority. The second thing, after you've prioritized and identified those areas that are most critical, those operational imperatives, I call them, then you have to then work with your external business partners, your vendors, to look for areas where you can either restructure contracts or take tasks that are done in-house and potentially have a third party take on those tasks at a better cost structure. And so it really comes down to leaning on those partnerships, both internally and externally, to find opportunities to reduce costs. And you do that first before you then turn to, unfortunately, having to look at staffing cuts, right? Because in order to drop a budget by 30, 40%, unfortunately, that's going to impact people. So you try to do that in the least possible way.
It's a lot of intense efforts are called for, and those must-haves certainly have to be first and foremost. And we have to be prepared for these downturns. They're going to happen, and our leadership is required to get the business through that. They're looking to us to reduce costs and improve efficiency. So utilizing those relationships that you built, your business partners, is really good, sound advice and good feedback. Hey, Branndon, do you anticipate any budget cuts or reductions in face of the current economic landscape? And what's some of the dialogue going on in your shop with your team?
Yeah, well, good question, Kevin, and thanks, and good insight there, George. I wouldn't say that we're necessarily anticipating any budget cuts or reductions. I think what we've always done is, regardless of the economic sort of situation or environment, is we look at all of our spending and make sure that we can assign value. George hit on it. There's buckets, right, where spending gets assigned to. If it's compliance or regulatory, it's pretty much not negotiable. And you almost put cybersecurity in there. And then there's operational things, right? So this is without these or without this, you cannot operate, you cannot complete your company's mission. And then there's sort of the bucket of enhancements or ways to increase or take on or change the way you do things. So sort of, we've always taken an approach when we're looking at the budget, and that are we spending the right money? Are we spending it the right place? What buckets is it assigned to? And make sure that we're turning it, we're either meeting some sort of compliance regulatory obligation, or we're delivering value, whether it's operational value or some sort of increased new line of business value. However, it is not, we do not take lightly that a couple things are happening. One, interest rates are rising, and as an organization that utilizes the market to complete projects and to finance things, that we take that into account. So things are going to cost more. Compound that with inflation, and the other thing we look at is that ultimately our customer at the end is every individual business or industry, right? They're going to have to pay an electricity bill, and that there is a potential that you're going to get some trickle up or down, however you look at it, impact from some of the squeeze that's going to happen at the consumer level. So I would say we're not necessarily anticipating, we're not sitting down here saying we have to cut the budget by 10 or 20 or 30%. What we are doing is making sure we're very mindful on our spending and being able to either assign it to a bucket or assign the value to it. And the other thing is not necessarily cutting budgets, but looking at maybe projects that we're doing and seeing how we can extend those. So instead of having all the spend here in third, fourth quarter of 2022 into 2023, looking if we can push that spend out a little bit so we incur those expenses on the out years, from a capital perspective. And then with people, one of the things, I joined AMP 13 years ago. I mentioned that, and it's like, what are the things what are the things that we have to do, and what are the things we should be doing? And looking at that from a technology standpoint, and not for a cheap plug here, but one of the things obviously that we have to do, but not necessarily should be doing is, our data center. And so obviously we partnered with Blue Bridge, 13, 14 years ago at this point. And because it just made more sense. It's like, we're going to push our spend to a partner who's going to become an expert in that. We don't have to pay for that expertise, and maybe more important than the initial paying of that expertise is the cost to maintain that expertise over time, and we can focus our attention somewhere else. So we're going through that same sort of examination now. We're looking at things that we have to do, things that we should do, things that's core to what our business is, things that differentiate us in the marketplace, and finding opportunities, even if on surface they don't look like they're necessarily saving dollars. It's looking at that soft value or that opportunity, the opportunity cost there for us to focus on things that kind of fit in those buckets. So hopefully that answered your question, Kevin, and I'll stop there.
Hey, Kevin, I'd like to add to that a little bit, because I think Branndon hits a key point. It's a great opportunity to reflect or look at what is discretionary versus non-discretionary. That's the first thing. I think that's what Branndon was really focused on there. And then second is meeting with your staff and looking at each individual task and process within your group to find the waste. Basically, it's the right time to identify those areas and streamline them. So sometimes I look at these downturns as not a negative, but an opportunity to really optimize or streamline how you support the business, your basic IT functions, whether it be help desk, why are there manual processes within the help desk, whether it's account resets or giving access to systems or so forth. Why does that happen? It's an opportunity, again, to reevaluate your operations.
So you both have laid out some really interesting dynamics of the roles CIOs play today, and particularly in these downturn times, but also looking optimistically to make ourselves better through innovation, through being pushed through difficult times. And what calls to my mind is a question about leadership in IT and standing in the C-suite, et cetera. 15, 20 years ago, how was that different for both of you to address than it is today? How has the CIO, the director of IT, in some shops, it's a single person, regardless of the size of the company. How has that role changed, the IT leader, then as it is to today? And how can we suggest those who are vying for attention in these difficult times in that C-suite, if you will, or in the shareholder place, what advice would you give to them to be taken seriously in the need to continue to invest in IT, digitalization, automation, et cetera, in these times?
Let me see if I can take that. I think we all know that the pandemic accelerated digital transformation. You basically don't have a choice now but to be, if you're in a CIO position, be more than a back office support organization. You have to be on the front lines of technology adoption with not just your internal users, but with your clients. I think, Kevin, you mentioned it earlier in the discussion. You're not just a cost center anymore either, compared to years ago where IT was, again, a back office function. You're now potentially a revenue or profit center, rolling out new and deploying new products to your customers, technology-oriented products. So I think that, well, I know the role of CIO has now transformed from more of a cost center to a partner and a leader in the boardroom, expected, not just asked, but expected to deliver top line results in addition to affecting the operating costs within each department through automation.
Excellent. Branndon, anything to add?
That's a great question. And, I think about my journey here at AMP specifically. It's sort of funny. I was just talking to a friend of mine, Catherine, who works in financial services up in Grand Rapids, because she's sort of facing some of the same problems. When I first joined AMP, the IT department was almost looked at as a nuisance, and I was really challenged. And at the same time, as an organization, we were growing quite a bit. Okay, we were transforming as a company. We were going from primarily a market power purchaser to building generation assets. I mean, several billion, $6-7 billion in new power plants. And those were going to require a lot of IT to operate, right? And that was foreign to this organization, both at the management level as well as the board of trustees. And so, hiring me was a big step, and not specifically because it's me, but just investing at the level and to a IT leader that they did. And then maybe more, well, I can tell you, definitely more important to me was me being able to build a team of strong individuals underneath me. And you know what? I say this, it's like, how do you get at the table and get into the conversation and go from a call center or what I would call a nuisance to having a voice? And George said it's about, earlier, before we started this, it's about delivery, right? So focusing on what it is the organizations need, whether they know it or not, being able to craft solutions, articulate those solutions in ways that the business can understand in terms of what it is they do. And then more importantly than all of that, because all that's just talk, is delivering. And that's what I did. And that's what I would encourage anyone to do, is really back up what you talk about and deliver. And then make sure that you're able to put together those value statements. It's a little different for our organization. We are nonprofit, so revenue and margin or profit isn't as important to us as it is to others. But what is very important to us is that every dollar we spend, we're getting some incremental value higher than that back, whether that's efficiency, getting more megawatts out of a plant, being able to deliver more services to our members, et cetera. So that's been sort of the journey there. The other part of that is the world's changing. You think about our industry, 100 years, you folks can argue that it's more or less than that. 100 years delivering electricity was as simple as basically throwing electricity on a wire and then someone on somewhere else on the other end consuming it. And there was really no intelligence, between the 2 points. And others would argue that there was none even on the other side of those. But if you think about electricity and its creation, electricity is the first real platform. Because without electricity, nothing that we're doing right now, nothing that we're using, these cameras, this would exist. And then, so you go back about 20 years ago, and again, folks can argue the exact time. This idea of Internet of Things, sensors, whatever you want to call it, starts getting introduced, and intelligence between point A and the inception and delivery becomes more and more important. At that point, as that continues to get integrated for all different reasons, whether it's because of distributed energy, or we want to be more energy efficient, or consumer demand, or we want to do pricing signals, all the changes that are happening with electric vehicles and electrification, whatever the reason is, there's no longer, probably going back 10 years ago, really probably with the joint, around the time that I joined AMP, the industry in a whole could no longer ignore the fact that technology leaders need to be on the table, and the investment, the significant investment in those technologies and those systems was going to have to. Just in summary, I encourage people that are in a role, no matter what the industry is, first and foremost, become an expert in the subject matter of the industry. There's a lot of technology experts out there, no shortage of them, whether it's because of passion or being attracted by, the fact that you can make a good living. But a rare person is someone who is a quote unquote technology expert, but is also a subject matter expert in their business. And I've had the pleasure of meeting a lot of people like George who become experts in both, and they are the most successful. So thanks, Kevin.
Excellent insight.
Kevin, could I add one other thing, if you don't mind? Because Branndon again touched on it. One significant change over the last 15 to 20 years is related to the team that you build as a CIO or C-level executive. I've had the opportunity to work with some just phenomenal people that were on my team over the last 15 years. But the makeup of that team has changed. Instead of having just pure technologists on your team, you now need people that understand the business, like Branndon said. You need people who are customer focused, that have a personality that can work with enterprise class clients, that can get out behind the monitor and actually meet with customers and understand their needs to design innovative technology solutions. That's the kind of IT team you have to build nowadays. It's less about hiring a great programmer, while that's important, but it's really about finding very innovative thinkers, problem solvers, and those people have great personalities where customers, both internal and external, gravitate to rather than away from. So if you have a team that's dynamic, personable, and just really, really smart, that's the type of team that you'll be successful with going forward.
Yeah, the spirit of integrating business and IT objectives together with personalities and roles, technical chops and soft skills, etc., business and IT knowledge combined. That's really good insight, and I think that's really the landscape currently. One point I'd like to add, and maybe you could both give a little bit of advice on, if those players aren't at the table today, how do you get them there? And how do you collaborate with other departments? For example, HR, maybe you want an app that has PHI compliance, protected healthcare information around your employees, and maybe you collaborate with HR and shift some of the budget, and understand their objectives and make sure that they're met, and get them maybe even as a champion to some of the things you're trying to do. So in the sense of, how do you collaborate with your peers and other departments today to help achieve, operational excellence?
Yeah, I'll hit that one simply. I'll be short, and that is, and Branndon mentioned that, it's deliver for them. When you commit to something small, deliver. When it's a project that's large, deliver. Hit the target, understand their business problem, and meet the expectations, whether it's HR, finance, or whatever internal business partner is, and then you'll gain that trust.
Branndon?
Yeah, and George is spot on with that. One little insight I'll add is the fact that IT, in some cases, and historically, in my role, prior to me getting there, it wasn't at the table. It isn't all to blame on the business. Some of it's, we as technology professionals need to sort of understand that some of the blame is on us. Some of those reasons is, my old CEO used to say, "Don't come to me and talk about migrations. Birds migrate." Another former CEO of mine, not here at AMP, but another organization, used to say, IT people are like dentists. If you go to one, they get you on a plan. And then for some reason, if you have to go to another one, they take you different direction, right? They go and they'll say, what in the heck happened? What did the last guy do? We got to go in here and do this new sort of plan. So for those that aren't at the table yet, maybe some self-realization is why. And I'm not suggesting that maybe there are cases where it's 100% innocence and it's everybody else to blame. But I think some of it's likely, and I can tell you even early in my career, was on me. And it's the ability to be able to articulate that message of value. Delivery, absolutely. So George has covered that, if I'm going to tell you I'm going to do something, do it the way I'm going to tell you, on time, on budget, and most importantly, with intended results, right? Don't deliver something else and say, well, I got it on time and on budget. That's a big piece. So sort of self-realization, understanding how to message yourself, how to deliver the value. The other thing to do, specifically from a peer-to-peer, right? If you want to build those relationships, and the best way to get to the table is, I read a book one time, How to Become the CEO. Build an army of people that you want to listen, right? And the best way to sort of get to the table is have all the people that are sitting at the table want you there. And so building those peer-to-peer relationships. So specifically, you say HR. One of the things about IT is it's basically the only department, I'm sure finance could argue, but they have a different turn on it, that really works and touches every single department in the organization intimately, meaning within their business processes, within the way they function. So when you sit down and you talk to your HR person, listen. Another little tidbit, and maybe part of self-realization, is IT historically has become or known as the Department of No. And I can tell you, when I joined AMP, one of the first things I said when I brought the small team together is we no longer are going to say no. We might not necessarily say yes, but so the answer could be maybe, or we need to look at that. But when you immediately say no, people the person on the other end of the conversation just looks at you and goes, you didn't even consider my request. So when you're meeting with your peer in HR or operations or finance or fill in the blank department, and you're trying to build those relationships, spend the time listening. Even if their request or what they're trying to do is absurd, and we are, and your answer is, we actually already have a system. You just don't want to use it. Listen, help them focus on requirements, and then come back and articulate solutions versus saying no. So those are just some ideas, thoughts. Those are the things that I've used in my career. Self-realization and listening, probably the two key words out of that I just said.
Yeah. And I also think that if you are in a room with some IT people, they usually think that, or sometimes think, they're the smartest people in the room. So I think humility and empathy are really important. And you mentioned listening, but to understand that your business partners have real problems and they need to be solved. So don't pretend that you understand their processes or their business. Have some humility and listen very carefully rather than assuming
It said time in production equal credibility. And as I listen to you gentlemen talk, I think about, yes, measuring those outcomes and engaging in those relationships. And over time, your team can see, when you put your mind, spirit, sense of your education, your passion for the mission, the company together, and you engage your fellows in the firm, the outcomes can't help but be better. You can't help but have diversity of opinion and inclusion of insights, and the mindset of maybe versus no is good. But you have to have that standing and credibility, and that's through production over time and measurement of that, and that comes. So let's jump into a little bit operational to leave listeners with is some ideas around operational excellence, the process, benchmarks. So George, I'll start with you. What are areas where the CIO or the CFO or treasurer, in this case, accountants, whatever small, large enterprise, what can they do to reduce operational expenses? And also, in light of that, can you describe your budgeting process and keys to success in the same?
Sure. Well, from a financial perspective, I was just reading a recent study done by PwC, where they found on average 46%, think about this, 46% of all work within a company can be automated in some way. 46%. That's just an enormous amount of wasted manual effort where today's tools can automate. So I would first start by saying, look for that low-hanging fruit where people are either reading inbound emails from suppliers, from customers, routing them, using Excel. You understand, there are so many different ways to automate, and the tools that you can use today to automate don't require custom software development in most cases. So there's some low-hanging fruit. That's first. And then when it comes to the budget, we touched on this before, that the most important thing is to understand the discretionary versus non-discretionary. What are those areas operationally where you can't cut corners? And when it comes to budgeting, meeting with each one of your key stakeholders within the departments to ensure that you've included everything that they need for the coming fiscal year, and then coming up with solutions, especially if it's if you think that there's going to be a downturn, instead of saying no, like Branndon said, that project's just not going to be feasible. Maybe there are lower cost alternatives to solve their problems. So creating a list of both discretionary and non-discretionary items within the budgeting process is step one. And then the most important at the end is to ensure that you've covered everything within the budgeting process, because the worst thing to do is in a quarter miss a major spend item that one department felt was included in the budget, and you didn't include it in the master budget. So it's really ensuring that you've covered all your bases. But again, it comes down to working with your internal business partners.
Terrific. And I suspect, Branndon, you would echo that. And could you tell us a little bit, Branndon, about what tools you use to benchmark your spend? So again, in the process, are there specific tools that you could recommend, or maybe just describe your experience of what you do to benchmark your spend? And with that, how important is external partnerships and budgeting appropriately? So I want to get that in while we're on the process and procedure.
Yeah, it's always tough to really sort of benchmark a budget holistically, at least for me and in the industry. So it's just like a lot of compounding things here. It's like the industry you're in, and then the type of, so we're in the electric utility business, and then so the type of electric utility we are, and then in the market we are, it's, and then you really start getting to that point, and then you realize, well, you are the only one, so there's hard for us to get sort of industry as it holistically. But what we do as far as spend goes is we do have some pretty good partnerships that allows us to benchmark. I mean, we're in a lot of different organizations as it relates to public power, which is technically what we are, meaning our utility is owned by cities, towns, municipals that own and operate their own electric system. So the city of Cleveland, for example, Cleveland Public Power is owned by the city of Cleveland. They're a member of AMP, happen to be our largest member. Village of Cary, Ohio, member of AMP. So, we're owned by these cities and municipals. And so we're part of this public power community. So we can benchmark ourselves across larger public power entities through whether it's the American Public Power Association or the Large Public Power Council, because we're considered large public power. So we have those tools in place. So we can look at stuff like, to revenue, to customers, what is your cybersecurity spend, to meters. Customers and meters typically are one and the same. But more specifically, probably more applicable to everyone, no matter what industry you are in, is we do have a partnership. We are a member of Gartner, and we utilize Gartner pretty much on every single thing that we purchase or every single project we do. We engage them in contract reviews, and then they have all sort of data, right? They have data across industries, cross size of companies worldwide, cross competitors of different products you're looking at. So, when we're going to, here recently, over the summer, we had a very large infrastructure refresh project around network switching. And, we negotiated what we think is our best deal. We look at what we think our spend is. And then we take that final, what we consider final, and we take it into Gartner and we let them sort of help negotiate, help benchmark that. They don't actually negotiate it. They have a practice that will actually do your negotiation. We don't do that. We take and send them the information. They work with us. They give us the data, and then allow us to go and sort of do that final negotiation. And time after time after time, they have found ways and given us data that we need to sort of be able to squeeze more money out of these things and get the same delivery. Just because, you think you're a good negotiator, but you're always, you may have the good techniques, but at the end of the day, the data is going to be king there. And a partner like Gartner helps get you that data. As far as the other part, other external partnerships and how they budget, it's like, we embrace, we used to have a saying, I used to have a saying here, we think cloud first. Now, that's going back in 2009, 2010. We still think cloud a lot, and we try to incorporate cloud, but I sort of pivot that message is we think what is best, right? Is that internal? Is that external? Is it cloud? Is it managed service? Is it a partner? And so working, so we have a bunch of strategic partners as far as that take care of some of the more commodity type business, whether it's data center, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's even cybersecurity, SOC, and bringing those folks in. And this is an exercise that's going to be very important to us as we look over the next couple of years, not to necessarily reduce budget, but to make sure that we're spending the right dollars in the right places, is work with those partners, bring them to the table and talk through with them. You already trust them. You think about it, if you're dealing with your data center partner, right? You already have the heartbeat of your organization is within their four walls. So why not sit down on the table with them and say, hey, these are sort of the pain points. These are sort of the areas that I'm looking for opportunities to save money, maybe whether it's save money, increase efficiency, overall increase effectiveness, and utilize those opportunities to have conversations to seek out ways that you can, maybe reduce spend. But another way to, at least in my world, instead of just necessarily going out and completely cutting the budget, that's an exercise that may have to happen, and maybe even here in some organization, but really is saying, hey, this dollar I'm spending now, it's still $1, but the return I'm getting is $2, which means next year I don't have to ask for that additional $1. And in my experience working with those partners that you already have trusted relationships, they're already doing pieces and parts of your businesses, finding out ways, more things that you can sort of unload on them and not increase your internal spend.
Excellent. I want to wrap up the dialogue with one question for each of you that's really relevant or germane to your industry, but also universal in the sense of budgeting process. And I'll start with you, George. In your new role, can you share how robotic process automation can be applied to reducing operating costs, improving productivity and compliance, and how business process automation plays a major role in a company's digital transformation journey? And I know you spoke about some of this in terms of the must-haves and such, but in this role, specifically around companies' digital transformation journey, what would you leave us with today?
Sure. I think I touched on it. 46% of all work can be automated. So I think there's a great opportunity. And I've said now to many people who I meet with on a weekly basis, customers, partners, that the technology's really transformed over the last 10 years. When I mean by technology, I mean integration technology, analytics, and RPA type technologies, where you can simply automate any business function with less effort than it took 5 to 10 years ago. These are not enterprise ERP projects. You can automate and find efficiencies with less work, less effort than before. And if companies haven't looked at RPA, that it's definitely an opportunity to do so right now, because that technology from some industry leaders has really come a long way. And I have significant experience as a CIO implementing. I had a team of engineers, and it was a small team, and they automated tens of thousands of hours of manual updating, manual workflows, and it didn't require complex integration. And that's what usually kills IT projects. Everyone knows that. Most projects die because of the complexity, and we just don't have the time and effort to focus on a project that goes longer than 90 days. I've always said, if a project longer than 90 days, it's probably 50% chance it's going to get killed. And automation today, with the tools and the know-how that's out there in the marketplace, you can integrate just about any function within days, if not weeks, if you have the right team. And it's a strategic priority.
Excellent, fantastic. And Branndon, let me jump back to you. Certainly, public power, the grid, your large generation facilities, your organization is across many states, many cities, municipalities, a lot of responsibility. You bring to the table the threat, attacks increased, the cyber issues. There's so much at stake in your industry around the grid and economic security, national security, and so forth. So as a result of that, it's my hunch that you've gotten pretty good at cybersecurity and how to get that in the budget and how to get that implemented. How do you know you're spending enough and in the right places? And how do you quantify a return on that investment so that you can, again, standing in credibility going forward, when you look to build your stack or change your stack, have the ear of your team?
Yeah, that is like probably one of the hardest questions to answer. So the answer to it is we're not spending enough, but the answer also is we're spending too much. And that's because from a technology standpoint, you look at it and, you look at it from so first off, let me back up a second. Really, you have to have someone that focuses on it. I'm very fortunate that I have an individual, Jared Price, who works for me. He's worked for me for a long time, and we've known each other for a very long time. And, that's basically what he does. I mean, he focuses on this, probably 70% of his job is focused on, the protection of not only our networks, but our assets, right? So when you're in, and anybody could argue any business, but these, what the government deems as critical infrastructure, right? If our assets are sort of breached or compromised, it has a trickle down effect, right? If you lose the grid, then you basically lose everything. It's sort of as I've mentioned before, it's the first platform. It's the first real platform. Everything is built on top of electricity. So having someone focused on that, and that's what they are, is kind of step one. Then to answer your question, how do you know you're spending enough? Well, it's a balance between sort of getting Jared comfortable. So if you look at it from his point of view and his desk, continuous threats, not only from external, internal, continuous changes that's happening with our core technology, whether it's vulnerabilities or new versions, and then continuous changes that happen in our industry, right? I mentioned it before, more egress points, right? Data and connectivity is what is going to be the foundational piece to the electric utility business, right? Because you're going to have distributed energy resources, everything's going to need to be connected, everything's going to need to be controlled remotely, and you're going to need all that data to make predictive type analytics and understand what's going to happen. So when you do that, you introduce all this stuff. So Jared's desk, he's sitting there, he's looking at it. Threats are just piling up. He's putting out solutions. He's trying to do his best, looking at solutions to make sure that he's not buying point solutions, but he's buying comprehensive solutions. And then he's able to articulate sort of what those solutions are, why. Really, when you talk about the question, how do you know you're spending enough or if you're spending too much, it's the ability to be able to articulate, whether it's to the CEO and executive management team or your board of trustees, the terms of why that you're doing this and what's the reasoning. And so we focus on being able to send those messages, whether it's through written reports or verbal updates. We are fortunate. We have a board meeting every month. We have a very engaged board, and we have the opportunity. We have a subcommittee of the board that's focused on technology and cybersecurity, and we get the opportunity to present, for anywhere from 15, depending on the month, up to a couple hours a month on, sort of these things. So we have the engagement there. And so what we do is we focus on sort of, this is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. This is the threats. We educate them on the threats. We just recently took them through a cyber security incident response exercise that was very eye-opening to everybody. But at the end of the day, there's really no way to sort of understand are you spending enough, because all you're really doing, cybersecurity is sort of the more cool way to say risk mitigation. You're really just mitigating the risk of some sort of event happening. And then, so you have to kind of, from an enterprise level, we do an enterprise risk assessment. We sort of put values on, what's the likelihood, the impact, how much money that, could be lost, and then appropriately looking at what the spend would be. And what is the sort of the appetite of the organization for spend? One of the areas that, and George is spot on, that is going to be able to sort of completely change the focus is, today it's sort of like detection and then sort of human response, right? So there's an event, we detect it, there's an event, we prevent it. It's building that automation across all your tools. So there's tools that detect, there's tools that respond, sort of taking the human element out of that and building the automation, robotics, whatever you want, the RPA between those two, and allow sort of AI to take over that. We've got some tools in place today that's doing some of that. I think if you talk to Jared offline, he would tell you that's probably the focus of what we need to spend more time on. And the other thing is, and we do this, and we've done this for years, going back since 2010, is we understand what we're going to be good at, and we understand what we have to do, and what we have to do, and we're not necessarily going to be good at, is finding the appropriate partners. So things like 24 SOC monitoring and EDR and managed MSSP type stuff, we've partnered with external parties over the years, and we've changed those parties, several times as our needs have changed. And so the answer to the question is, you're never spending enough, and you're spending too much. But you have to sort of appropriately understand what your appetite is, and make sure that you're looking at it from a risk mitigation standpoint versus impact and likelihood. And as long as you're sort of tying all that together and presenting that and getting buy-in from your executive management and your board, you should be okay. Again, if there's an incident, some sort of breach, you pull out the incident response plan. Step one always is going to be likely for the technology person, update resume, because
Well, it's deadly serious business. Good stuff, gentlemen. I promised a terrific dialogue, and you two have delivered indeed. The downside is we've run out of time for Q&A. However, I want to promise to any of the listeners, if you have any additional questions for George or Brendan, please reach out to me, kjg@bbnllc.com, and I'll see to it that your question gets answered. So in the spirit of time, first of all, thank you both for your expertise. I promised deep and wide knowledge and information, and we've delivered. We covered a lot of ground in a short period of time. So thank you very much. And I'd like to turn the webinar over to our sales manager, Steve Grossenbaugh, who's going to talk quickly about a few tools and ways that BlueBridge can help you in this budgeting process. And thanks for joining us in our continued educational series. Steve?
Yes, good morning, Kevin. Great talk. George, thank you. Branndon, thank you. I think a few of the things that I picked up there myself was discretionary and non-discretionary, right? Now is the time to streamline when you go through these economic downturns. Oftentimes you have the ability to come out the other side much more efficient. So thank you both. So I just wanted to get onto the consulting side a little bit here, if I could. So here at BlueBridge, we are a service provider, right? So what we've done is we've taken IT and kind of broken into two stacks, right? You've got your infrastructure stack and you've got your endpoint and user stack. How we figure out, approximately where you should be, because industry by industry, it does vary according to what you spend. But we've got a tool that we can take, the number of your endpoints, the number of your VMs, staff, email, etc., and kind of give you a guideline of where you should be at, right? So let's talk a little bit about the infrastructure stack that we can help you with here. Really, the infrastructure is what makes your business run. Those are your core IT assets. So from a packaging standpoint, we would propose to manage your servers. That's going to be patching and antivirus and monitoring. Of course, once your servers are in place, backup is huge. We do partner with Veeam. Their backup and replication product is fantastic. So with backup, then you need storage, right? Now, because BlueBridge has our flagship here in Cleveland, we've got another tier 3 down in Columbus, and then we have Mayfield Heights. So from a compliance standpoint, your data can be in different places so that you can check those boxes, different power grids, etc. So DNS protection is also something very important. This is kind of an extension in a way of the firewall. So the software platform will do billions of queries a day, looking for known bad sites, known good sites, and even those in between gray sites. It helps protect the users from going to those bad places automatically, kind of saves them from themselves. Then, of course, you've got your firewall, your networking equipment. We could help you guys monitor those with the tools that we use, taking some of the burden off of your internal staff. So quick sum up on the infrastructure stack. It's managed servers, it's Veeam backup and replication, it's data storage, the monitoring of firewall and networking equipment, and then, of course, the DNS protection. The other stack is kind of your users or endpoints, right? So we do use a cloud-based cybersecurity partner in Bitdefender. We would take that layered approach, being endpoint protection and response, patch management, your base layer, antivirus, in which everything else is built upon. Taking it a little further, advanced threat security is huge. The reason being is with this platform, you can catch those zero-day attacks. Traditional antivirus doesn't necessarily do a good job on those 0 days. 0-day attacks are when a piece of malware is first discovered out in the wild, right? So we can definitely help there. Security on the exchange or the email side is huge. And then full disk encryption. Remote users are everywhere these days. Folks are starting to travel again. Don't take the chance of them losing a laptop or getting stolen. With full disk encryption, you really have the ability, if someone does get that equipment, they can't read the data. So you're not out intellectual property. You're out, $1,000 from a laptop. That's recoverable. more over to the end users themselves, cybersecurity awareness training is huge. The platform is automated. It keeps your end users up to date regarding, the latest tactics that the bad guys are using. If folks are clicking on phishing emails, they'll be trained. You can get reports on who those clickers are so that you can speak to them and maybe help guide and coach them how to avoid those things. Then, of course, you've got multi-factor authentication. If you're not doing that today, please look to us. We can help. If not, definitely think about getting that into your cybersecurity posture. Because your users will have questions. Hey, I can't print, can't remember my password, etc. We build in a 5-hour block of business hour help desk time. We do build those in 15-minute increments to keep everything fair. Resetting a password shouldn't cost you an hour. By nature, being a data center, we are 24/7, 365. So if you do need help at 2 o'clock in the morning, of course, we'd always be there. And probably lastly is on the 365 side. Most of us know about the shared responsibility model that Microsoft uses. If not, briefly, Microsoft will provide the platform, but the end users are responsible for data security and backup. So we make it very easy with the Veeam Office 365 backup. For those in regulated or compliance type industries, we do have the ultimate add-on. It's a managed detection and response. It is backed by a US-based security operations center down in San Antonio. Really what this does is this takes all of those layers of technology and software and such, but combines it with true cybersecurity experts, human beings, right? So they're constantly watching for attacks against your organization. So as a quick recap on that side, that layered approach is certainly the best way to go. I've been doing this about 20 years now. I believe BlueBridge is underpriced in the marketplace, meaning we'll bring you great value. On the next renewals that you guys are looking at, maybe looking at other partners, give us a call. Let us know. We'd like to help you guys. And last but not least, if there are other folks involved with these decision-making processes when you're picking partners, which they likely are, now's the time to bring them on board. The webinar replay will be sent out to your inboxes. Watch it with them. Have questions. Give us a call. My contact, best way to reach us is at info@bbnllc.com. You could always give me a call at 216-367-7589. I'm good on my side here. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Kevin, thank you for moderating, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Steve. Thanks again, George, Brendan. Terrific presentation.
Thank
Your
you.
expertise, as always, very helpful. And I'm sure I'll hear from some folks, and I'll get in touch with you with that Q&A. We can continue this dialogue. But once again, we covered a lot of ground in a short period of time. Thank you very much. We'll sign off now, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.